It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about cognitive, what's that word, Ben?
Distortions.
Stinkin Thinkin.
Our stinking thinking, which is what my redneck term works there. So, but we'll get right to that conversation. Big words, little words, whatever it may be, right after these important messages. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is presented by Faulkner University. Faulkner University is a private Christian liberal arts university based in Montgomery, Alabama, with a mission to provide an education anchored by not only intellect, but also character and service. The Faulkner experience aims to educate the whole person. Every individual matters every day. We all want to become better versions of ourselves. No one wants to remain trapped where they are because of missed opportunities and unrealized dreams. At Faulkner University, we believe your dreams don't have an expiration date. We understand that you're looking for more than a degree. You want to find your niche and thrive in your career. Whether you're a high school senior just beginning your trek or an adult student looking for a better path, Faulkner is here to help guide your journey. Go to faulkner.edu to apply or get more info. That's faulkner.edu. I'm Travis Creasy. That's all-pro counselor with 3 Chord Counseling in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and my cousin for all of my life, actually.
All of it.
How are you, Ben?
I'm great, man. I'm doing great. Been a good weekend. Hope everything is going well with you guys. Always a pleasure to be able to jump on here and talk a little bit of mental health and Christianity and all kinds of good stuff that we get to discuss on here with our good buddy, Will Mahan. And I hope you're doing well, Will.
Mill and Will.
Will.
I like it.
I'm doing well. I'm just real interested on this stinking thinking. So I'm curious to hear where this is going to go. And I'm sure our listeners are very curious what the three of us would explain as stinking thinking.
I got a thinking problem. Sorry, go ahead.
Thinking problem. Well, last episode we were talking a little bit about self-talk. And so as we were talking about that, I couldn't help but think a little bit about this idea of cognitive distortions. Comes from a book called Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy by David Burns. One of the first books I remember that I was recommended by Lonnie Jones to talk about or to read and look at. And it's not that it is making the claim in the book that depression is not an important thing to take seriously or that there's not some good in medication. A lot of people have to, but that a lot of our depressed type thoughts, not necessarily clinical depression, but a lot of things that we find ourselves really struggling with, as we talked about last time with negative self-talk, comes from some stinking thinking. So it comes from some cognitive distortions. In other words, cognitions are our thoughts. Distortions are ways that our thoughts get twisted and wrapped up and in really bad places. And so and that's David Burns, discusses these 10 cognitive distortions. You can go online and you can probably find people who divide them out into different ones and maybe have some others that they've added to. But I usually stick to his list just because it was probably one of the first. And so we're just going to talk about a few of those this episode, maybe talk about a few of them next episode. So,
all right. Well, I guess what we'll do is I'll read the little thing that you sent me, introduce a thought. Ben can unpack it. And then Will, if you want to read the next one when Ben gives us the pause to do so. And we'll just work our way through the first 5. So the first one is probably fairly straightforward. All or nothing thinking, sometimes called black and white thinking. If I'm not perfect, I have failed. Either I do it right or not at all.
Yeah, so like almost an idea of perfectionism. Sometimes people get really caught up in it's got to be this way or that. If I hit every putt, then I'm doing great. If I miss one, then I am a terrible golfer.
I'm a terrible golfer.
We're all golfers, right? And so the idea a lot of times comes if I make a 99 on a test, if I just if I don't do everything perfect, then I am absolutely a failure. And so all or nothing, you better get it all right every time. So we're just talking about Paul didn't get it right every time. And we were talking about that in the last episode. Paul messed up, but Paul could still say, I'm still in the room. A lot of times we've talked about that in counseling sessions is, this is ideal. This side of the piece of paper is ideal. This side of the piece of paper is unacceptable. And when we have such a cut and dry idea of good, bad, and getting everything perfectly, man, I'm going to fall into feeling bad about myself quite often because I'm going to miss that mark a lot of times. And so it's a little bit more like playing in the room. This side of the screen is ideal. This side of the screen is unacceptable. And as long as I'm kind of living in here, there's some things, like you said, Romans chapter 5, a lot of grace on some areas, but then there's some things that are unacceptable too. And so you've got to, kind of figure out where that is and say, hey, I can mess up. It's okay to mess up. But I don't want to really be in the unacceptable end, but I'm probably never going to be on the ideal end either. There's
who we watched in real time, us Alabama fans, and who we watched that grow over 17 years was Nick Saban. Like, I mean, by the end, we almost didn't recognize him, but it's like good for him. Like, it was good for him. Like, I remember sitting there going, man, good for him. That guy had to be like one of the most miserable people on the planet. But also, like, there were people like freaking out, like, where is mean Nick Saban who had there was no, it's like,
there was no grace and mercy.
How can you live like that? It's got to be very difficult. I think we all have experienced that for sure.
Yeah.
So these people are the curve killers, is what I call them, is because it was the 99s, and I always, needed the extra 7-8 points on the curve, and so you curve killers,
But so many times you think about that mindset, and I know that there's benefit, and I've tried to stay out of trouble with parents when I'm talking to them, but there's benefit to making all A's, or to be in the top of your class or whatever. I know there's some benefits to it, but ultimately, for most people, you end up, and especially get into college, if you're not going on past college, you can struggle and strain to make all A's every single class, do everything, and be really miserable doing it. And for what end? What did you do it for? What was the ultimate purpose? Learn what you need to learn. Get out of the classes what you need to get out of the classes, for what you're doing. But, there's not really a reason to make yourself ultimately miserable for those things. And that if I missed a question or two on a test and now I'm a failure, that's not a real healthy mindset to be in.
I'm glad my parents always told me there's always somebody smarter. There's always somebody that's more athletic, and always somebody that's better looking. So just glad
realistic, right? Just realistic.
So the second one is called the mental filter. So only paying attention to certain types of evidence. For example, noticing our failures, but not seeing our successes.
Yeah. So you ever noticed how sometimes we block out the positive comments that people make? We were talking about that, about our self-talk, our own personal self-talk. But there's times when people go, man, Will, you did a great job today. And what do you do? What's your response to that sometimes?
I listened to the one person that told me the sermon wasn't any good.
Yeah. So you filter out the positives, and you only hear the negatives. Like the thing that I've always held up, a blank piece of paper with a white dot in it. What do you see? Well, most people see the white dot. Like, well, there's 99% of that is a white piece of paper, but you notice the dot because we have a tendency to look for and see the negatives. And so if my mindset is I'm going to look for and see the negatives, then I'm going to be negative. That's what I'm going to notice. And that's kind of where I'm going to be. So at the end of the day, what am I looking at? So that's why we said at the end of the day in last episode, what did I accomplish today? What did I do good today? What did I do that makes me proud today? What's something I can be excited about that I accomplished in my life today? Because so many times we filter out the negatives, or filter out the positives and only see the negatives. So, trying to be aware, am I doing that? And if I am, let's try to make a little bit of a change with it.
And, none of our wives listen to this podcast, but if you're a preacher's wife out there, your opinion matters, right? Like if you haven't complimented him on his sermon or whatever in a while, do that. You may not think he cares, but trust me, there is no compliment like the preacher's wife, say it to her husband. Hey, that was pretty good today.
Yeah,
make me set up a little straighter and, feel pretty good. But the next one is jumping to conclusions. No one on here does that at all. There are two key types of jumping to conclusions. There is mind reading, imagining we know what others are thinking, and fortune telling, predicting the future.
Yeah. So this one kind of in some lists get broken up into two, but it's just basically the idea of that we think we know what other people are saying in the first one or what other people are thinking. It's the old idea of when you would walk into a classroom and somebody's laughing and you think they're laughing at you automatically. You jump to conclusions that, oh, the worst has happened. The worst is going to happen. People hate me. And if I go into a room with the mindset that somebody is going to make fun of me or somebody is thinking negatively about me, then everything I do is based upon what's in my mind already. So we talk a lot of times about just the filter of our brain. It's, usually comprised of what we have lived through, what we've done, the way we were raised, whatever. And so we hear everything with that filter. Will can tell me you're stupid and Travis can tell me you're stupid. And I might take one of them and use it and go with it. I might think, oh, I really am stupid because Will said it. And if Travis said it, I'd be like, consider the source. Whatever the case may be, is we sometimes, the same words can be said and we blow some of them off and we hold on to other ones. And so that whole mind reading, I see them laughing, I see them doing something, and I just, I automatically think that I've done something, wrong in those moments. And then the fortune telling is, how many times have you said, I'm going to fail that test tomorrow? I'm going to mess up. I'm going to mess up this putt. I'm going to shank this drive, whatever the case may be. When we think it or we do that, we already set ourselves up for failure. Like you were saying, I think in the last episode, don't miss it, don't miss it, don't miss it. I'm already kind of fortune telling this is going to be a bad day. Guess what? If you go into the day thinking it's going to be a bad day, sometimes it's a really bad day. So, our mindset impacts the outcome a lot of times.
And there's a lot of teenagers that they just fit into that. It's
yes.
I see it all the time in youth ministry. It's exactly what you said. They don't hear a conversation, and just because they don't hear it, but somebody glanced at them, bam, the conversation had to be about them. Maybe some of that self-centeredness with a few of them, but
well, some of that with teenagers too goes back to the idea that their amygdala, which is where our fight or flight mechanism is at and kind of is seated. Our fear is being finalized and really doing a lot of work in our brain, in that part of our brain during the teenage years. So everything is a threat to them. Yeah. So, the moment somebody laughs, they're laughing at me. The moment your parents say, we can't go there, it's like, it's because I'm a terrible person, so they turn everything into that. But yes, you're right. That same idea, this one is probably one of the bigger ones that you see with teenagers.
Well, the next one is emotional reasoning, assuming that because we feel a certain way that we think it must be true, kind of the idea of I feel embarrassed, so I must be an idiot because of the feeling that I have.
Yeah. So going back to, I think last episode too, we might have just really briefly mentioned what I feel versus what I know, and the idea of emotional reasoning is I feel this, therefore that's what I am, and so we would tell people that are going to go to the grocery store while they're hungry that's a bad idea, right? Because you're going to buy everything that's in the grocery store. You would tell people who are about to make a purchase after the death of a loved one, take some time, because while you're emotional, you don't make good decisions. I'm sure that Travis has pulled guys out of a football game or out of a basketball game when he's seen the emotion rise. Is that true? Have you had to go, hey, come take a ride on the pine for a few minutes and think it over before I put you back in the game? Why is that?
Because you can see they're not going to be thinking clearly because they're giving into that primal. You can see it. Why? Because I've seen it myself. I know, hey, you better calm your roll down. But yeah, any 15-yard penalty in football used to get you over there with me. Like, okay, what are we thinking? You need to take a breath. You need to get away from whoever you're dealing with out there.
And a lot of times I've said they weren't thinking. The crowd says, what were they thinking? They weren't. They were emotional.
Obviously.
Emotions and intellect don't play well together. And some of that is partially because your right side of your brain controls your emotions. Your left side of your brain controls the intellectual and logistics and language and a lot of those things. And so when you get emotional, some of the best things you can do is try to start, getting someone engaged, someone who is emotional, get them engaged in thinking about something in math or just answering some questions or whatever else. And if you can get that side of the brain initiated, the emotions can kind of come down. But we just don't reason well while we're emotional. So
I think, man, one of the greatest thinking of football, and then I'll introduce the last one for the thing, but I'm sure you've heard the story about the 49ers and Joe Montana. They're trying to go win the game. They're on their end of the field, need to score a touchdown to win, which they inevitably did. They're all crowded in. They're all looking to Joe Montana. He's like, hey, it's John Candy over there. It's like this comedian in the third row. And everybody looks at, he's cool as a cucumber. He's not nervous. Everybody else is like, we got to go down there and score. And he's like, there's John Candy over there. And I've pulled that trick a couple of times, not John Candy, but I try to think of something going on in the crowd. Hey, look at so-and-so. Hey, there's grandma. Do you really want to do that here in front of grandma? And of course, then grandma's up there like, kill him, so it doesn't work all the time. But yeah.
Isn't it either you or Lonnie that has said that emotions are things that allow us to make better decisions, or it's kind of like emotions are not the decision that you should make, but they're to help us kind of make those decisions. And it's almost like that breath or that moment away actually can make you smarter versus just the emotion is the decision.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're talking about is we've talked a little bit about the idea of they do not tell us what to do.
Yeah.
They just give us information.
That's right.
So emotions are information, not instruction.
Yeah.
So, when our emotions, when it's angry, it's kind of like the difference in a thermostat and a thermometer. So when I'm, if I want to control the temperature in the room, I go to the thermostat, but a thermometer just tells me what the temperature is. So my emotions tell me I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, whatever the emotion is. They don't tell me what to go do. So, I have to make sure and be careful not to say, okay, I'm angry, punch somebody in the face. It's not the right choice. God gives us the emotions to help us know what the temperature of our body is, but not to go and act on it. And I think that's where people get really confused in the Bible, where it says, anger is a sin. Well, God got angry. Jesus got angry. It's not a sin to be angry. It's a sin what we do with our anger and how we, how it manifests itself in us. So, yeah, good point.
I think with all these, as we get to wrap up, the question needs to be why? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I think that they're judging me? And with the last one we'll cover on this episode, why am I labeling those people? Labeling, assigning labels to ourselves or other people. I'm a loser, I'm completely useless, or they're such an idiot. And man, all these are on full display. If you've not seen any of them and you'd like some examples, just go to Twitter/X or go to Facebook and you will see all this on full display.
Absolutely. And the reason for that is we so many times want to put a label on ourselves or on others. And what we need to recognize is I'm more than that. Paul would say he messed up. Other people in the Bible, we are quick to put labels on. Thomas was a doubter, right? We know him as doubting Thomas. And yet it was Thomas, even though it seems kind of negative, even in the sense, when Jesus said, "Hey, we're going to Lazarus's house," and Thomas says, "Well, let's go with you so we can die with you." It's pessimistic, but he's faithful, and a lot of times we call Thomas the doubter, but Thomas was faithful to Jesus. Look, if you're going to go die, I'm going to go die with you. And so, there's things like that we a lot of times label ourselves that are not fair. They're not fair to the rest of ourselves. I may have missed something. I may have messed up something, but that's not who I am. I'm more at the core than my mistakes. And so not letting my mistakes or the people around me, a lot of times we are quick to say, well, they're such a whatever, or, remember something that someone did and kind of label them for that, rather than, okay, they made a mistake and I can look beyond that mistake. We stamp that label and people carry it forever because of it.
Well, why don't you do us a favor? I mentioned social media, all that stuff. Why don't you share this episode, whatever platform is your favorite platform, on all the platforms, and maybe those other people will get the hint. Right? It's the other people that need to get a hint and hear this. And feel free to tag them. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. That probably won't work out in your favor. If you've not rated the podcast, we'd love to take 5 stars. Leave us a review. Podcasts are shared mainly by word of mouth. And so do us a solid. If you like this info, be sure to do that. Will, you got anything else before we jump on for the next episode and get to the next 5?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well, be sure to tune in to the second episode as we keep talking about stinking thinking and whatever Ben calls it.
Cognitive distortions.
Excellent.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.